that the way we want to start the morning with humming and buzzing? I was going to get some coffee, but I decided to make it on time. Oh, wait a minute. I'm not on the schedule today. Oh, Lord God. I wonder how I'm going to do. Need some counseling. How to play games better.
Tomorrow they shall be frozen with fear, and shall fall motionless before you, like the guardians of the sepulchre, who felt their arms escape from their hands, and fell. They would fight, when an earthquake announced the presence of the God on that Calvary on which you were going to mount the breach. Still a few moments, and these colors, the last bulwark of the infidels, shall be
Even up.
These mosques, which stand upon Christian ruins, shall serve as temples for the true God, and Jerusalem shall only henceforward hear the praises of the Lord. At these last words of fear, the most lively transports broke through among the Christians. They embraced, shedding tears, and exhorting each other to support the evils and the fatigues of which they should so soon receive the glorious reward. The Christians at length descended the Mount of Olives to return to their camp, and, taking the route southward, they saluted on their right the tomb of David, and passed close to the pool of Siloam, where Christ restored sight to the man born blind. They perceived, further on, the ruins of the palaces of Judah, and marched along the declivity of Mount Shin, where other remembrances arose before them to add to their enthusiasm. Towards evening, the Christian army returned to their quarters, repeating these words of the prophet: "The nations of the west shall fear the Lord, and the nations of the east shall see his glory." When they had regained their camp, the greater part of the pilgrims passed the night in prayer. The leaders and the soldiers confessed their sins at the feet of their priests, and received their God, whose promises filled them up, confident and calm. Whilst these things were passing in the Christian camp, the most profound silence reigned over the walls of Jerusalem. Nothing was heard but the voices of men from hour to hour, from the tops of the mosques of the city, all the Muslim rooms to prayer. The infidels came in crowds to the temples to implore the protection of their prophet, and swore by the mysterious stone of Jacob to defend a city, which they called the house of God. The besieged and the besiegers were stimulated by equal ardor to fight and to shed their blood, the former to preserve, and the latter to conquer a city which both held sacred. The hatred which animated them was so violent that during the whole siege no Muslim deputy came into the Christian camp, nor did the Christians deign to summon the garrison to surrender. Between such enemies the shock must necessarily be terrible, and the victory implacable. The leaders of the Christian army being examined to decide upon the date for attacking the city, it was resolved to take advantage of the enthusiasm of the police, which was at its height, and to press forward the assault, the preparations for which were rapidly well known. As the Saracens had raised a great number of machines on the sides of the city most threatened by the Christians, it was agreed that they should change the dispositions of the siege, and that the principal attack should be directed towards the points where the enemy had made the least preparations for defense. During the night, Godfrey removed his quarters eastward, near to the Gate of Cedar, and not far from the valley in which Titus was encamped when his soldiers penetrated into the galleries of the temple. The rolling tower, and the other machines of war which the Duca, Lorraine had caused to be constructed, were transported with incredible difficulty in favor of the wall he intended to attack. Tancred and the two hobbits got loading their machines between the gate of Damascus and the angular tower, which was afterwards called the Tower of Tancred. 169. When the Saracens, at daybreak, saw these new dispositions, they were seized with astonishment and affright. The Crusaders might have taken profitable advantage of the enormous Christian trade in the enemy, but on steep ground it was difficult to bring the towers up close to the walls. Raymond in particular, who was charged with the attack on the south, found himself separated from the rampart by a ravine, which it was necessary to have filled up. He immediately made it known by heraldic arms that he would pay dinner to every person who should cast 3 stones into it. A crowd of people instantly flew to second the effort of the soldiers. Nor could the darts and arrows, which were hurled not hail from the ramparts, at all, arouse the ardor and zeal of the assailants. At length, at the end of the 3rd day, all was finished, and the leaders gave the signal for a general attack. On Thursday the 14th of July, 1009, as soon as day pealed, the clarion sounded in the camp of the Christians. All the Crusaders flew to arms. All the machines were in motion at once. The stone machines, and then the solid of shadows of things, whilst under the cover of fortresses and galleries, the rams were brought close to the walls. Then, archers and crossbowmen kept up a continual discharge against the rampart. Whilst the most brave climbed up the ladders in places where the walls seemed to offer least resistance. On the north, east, and south of the city, the 3 towers advanced toward the ramparts, amid the tumult and shouts of the soldiers and the workmen. Godfrey appeared on the highest platform of his wooden fortress, accompanied by his brother Eustace and Baldwin Newburgh. He animated his people by his example, and every javelin that he cast, save the historians of the times, carried death among the Saracen host. Raymond, Tancred, the Duke of Normandy, and the Count of Flanders followed with their soldiers. Whilst the knights and men at arms, animated by the same zeal as their principal chiefs, flew from place to place where danger called them. Nothing could equal the impetuosity of the first shock of the Christians. But they were everywhere met by an obstinate resistance. Arrows, javelins, boiling oil, quick fire, 14 machines which the besieged had no time to oppose to those of their enemies, repulsed on all sides the attacks and the efforts of the assailants. The infidels, issuing through a breach made in the rampart, attempted to burn the machines of the besiegers and carry disorder among the Christian ranks. Towards the end of the day, the towers of Godfrey and Tancred could no longer be moved, whilst that Raymond fell to pieces. The combat had lasted 12 hours, without victory having inclined to the side of the Crusaders, when night came to put a temporary end to the efforts of both parties. The Christians returned to their camp, trembling with rage and grief. The leaders, but particularly the two hobbits, lamenting that God had not yet thought them worthy, entered into his holy city, and adoring the tomb of his son. 170. The night was spent anxiously on both sides, each deploring their losses, and trembling at the idea of others they were likely to sustain. The Saracens dreaded a surprise. The Christians were afraid that the Saracens would burn the machines they had left under the walls. The besieged were employed without intermission in repairing the breaches made in the walls, whilst the besiegers were equally active in putting their machines in a state of service against a fresh attack. The following day brought a renewal of the same dangers and the same combat pursuing another risk. The chiefs, indeed buoyed by their speeches to raise the courage of the Crusaders, whilst the priests and bishops indefatigably visited the tents of the soldiers, promising them the assistance of heaven. The Christian army, filled with renewed confidence in victory, appeared under arms, and marched in profound silence towards the points of attack, whilst the for she walked in procession round the city. The first shock was impetuous and terrible. The Christians were indignant at the resistance they had met with the day before, and, out of fury, the besieged, who had learned the approach of an Egyptian army, were animated by the hope of victory, and the ramparts were protected by machines of a formidable description. The mutually discharged javelins hissed on all sides. While stones and leaves, launched by both Christians and infidels, were dashed against each other in the air with a frightful noise, and fell upon the assailants. From the height of the towers, the Muslims unceasingly hurled live torches and firearms. The wooden fortresses of the Christians, opposed to walls amidst a conflagration which was increasing in awe, poured below them. The infidels directed their attacks particularly against the tower of Godfrey, upon the side of which shone a cross, a pole, the sight of which provoked their utmost fury. The Duke of Louis saw one of his esquires and many of his soldiers fall by his side. But although himself immune for all the arrows of the enemy, he fought on with their wounded, and never ceased to exhort his companions to redouble their courage and ardor. The Count of Bruce, who attacked the city on the south side, brought up all his machines to bear against those of the Muslims. He had to contend against the Emir of Jerusalem, who animated his people by his words, and appeared upon the wall surrounded by the immediately Egyptian soldiery. Toward the north, Temple and the two Roberts stood motionless at the head of their battalions, on the ruined fortress, impatient to withhold lance and sword. Already the hands had, upon several points, shaken the walls, behind which the Saracens with those ranks presented themselves as a last rampart against the attacks of the Christians. In the midst of the conflict, two female magicians appeared upon the ramparts of the city, calling, as the historians say, upon the elements and the imperial powers. They could not, however, themselves avoid the death which they invoked upon the Christians, and fell dead beneath the shower of arrows and stones. 171. Two Egyptian emissaries, sent from Ascalon to exhort the besieged to persist in their defense, were surprised by the Crusaders as they were endeavoring to enter the city. One of them fell covered with wounds, and the other, having revealed the secret of his mission, was, by means of a machine, hurled upon the ramparts where the Saracens were fighting. But the combat had now lasted half a day without affording the Crusaders any hope of carrying the place. All their machines were on fire, and they wanted water, but more particularly vinegar, 172, which alone will extinguish this species of fire employed by the besieged. In vain the bravest exposed themselves to the greatest dangers to prevent the destruction of the wooden towers and the ramps. They fell buried under the ruins, and the flames consumed even their bucklers and vestments. Many of the most intrepid warriors had met with death at the foot of the ramparts. A great number of those who were upon the towers had been disabled, whilst the rest, covered with sweat and dust, fatigued by the weight of their arms and the heat, began to lose courage. The Saracens, who perceived this, uttered loud cries of joy. Among their blasphemies, they reproached the Christians with worshipping a god who was not able to defend them. The assailants deplored their fate, and, believing themselves abandoned by Jesus Christ, remained motionless on the field of battle. But the combat was destined soon to change its appearance. All at once, the Crusaders saw a knight appear upon the Mount of Olives, waving his buckler and giving the Christian army the signal for entering the city. 173, Godfrey and Raymond, who perceived him first and at the same time, cried out aloud that St. George was come to the help of the Christians. The tumult of the fight allowed neither reflection nor examination. The sight of the celestial horsemen fired the besiegers with new ardor, and they returned to the charge. Women, even children, and the sick mingled in the alley, bringing water, food, and arms, and joined their efforts to those of the soldiers to move the rolling towers, the terror of the enemy, near the ramparts. 174, that of Godfrey, in spite of a terrible discharge of stones, arrows, and Greek fire, advanced near enough to have its drawbridge lowered upon the walls. flaming darts flew, at the same time, in showers against the machines of the besieged, and against the sacks of straw and hay, and bags of wool which protected the last walls of the city. The one assisted the fire, and drove the flames upon the Saracens, who, involved in masses of flame and smoke, retreated before the lances and swords of the Crusaders. Godfrey, preceded by the two brothers, led out and painted for the true knight, and followed by Baldwin Dufour, Eustace, Bravo Britain, 175, Gunnar, Bernard de St. Vallier, and Amedro d'Albret, rushes upon the enemy, pursues them, and upon the track of their footsteps enters Jerusalem. All the brave men who fought with him on the platform of the tower, followed their intrepid chief, penetrated with him into the streets, and massacred all they met in their passage. At the same time a report was heard from the Christian army that the whole Pontic Redeemer and several crusaders who had fallen during the siege had appeared at the head of the assailants, and had unfurled the standard of the cross upon the towers of Jerusalem. Tangled in the two authors, animated by this account, made fresh efforts, and at last got themselves into the place, accompanied by Hugh de St. Paul, Gerard de Rochellin, Louis de Besson, Conan, Lambert de Montagu, and Raston de Berne. A crowd of heroes followed them closely, some entering by a half-open breach, others scaling the walls with ladders, and many leaping from the tops of the wooden towers. The Muslims fled on all sides, and Jerusalem resounded with the cry of victory of the Crusaders. It is the will of God. It is the will of God. 176. The companions of Godfrey and Tancred beat the gate of St. Stephen to pieces with axes, and the city with the door thrown open to the crowd of Crusaders, who pressed forward and contended for the honor of dealing the last blow to the conquered infidels. Raymond alone still experienced some resistance. Warned of the success of the Christians by the clashing of arms and the tumult he heard in the city, he endeavored still further to animate the soldiers. The latter, impatient to join their companions, abandoned their tower and machines, which they could no longer move. They planted ladders and swords, by means of which they mounted the rampart, where they were preceded by the Count of Toulouse, Raymond Pellet, the Bishop of Byra, the Count de Die, and William de Sovereign. Nothing now could stop their progress. They dispersed the Saracens, who earlier had taken refuge in the fortress of David, 177, and soon all the Crusaders, united in Jerusalem, embraced, wept for joy, and gave all their attention to the completion of their victory. Despair, however, for a moment forced the bravest of the Saracens to rally, and they charged with impetuosity the Christians, who, in the security of victory, were proceeding to the pillage. 178. The latter were even beginning to give way before the enemy they had so recently conquered, when Everard de Pizzi, of whom Raoul de Caen has celebrated the bravery, revived the courage of his companions, placed himself at their head, and once more spread terror among the infidels. From that moment the Crusaders had no more enemies to contend with. History has remarked that the Christians entered Jerusalem on a Friday at the hour of 3 in the afternoon. Exactly the same day and hour at which Christ expired for the salvation of the human race. It might have been expected that this memorable epic would have awakened sentiments of mercy in their hearts. But irritated by the threats and protracted insults of the Saracens, incensed by the sufferings they had undergone during the siege, and by the resistance they had met with even in the city, they filled with blood and mourning that Jerusalem which they came to deliver, and which they considered as their own future country. The carnage soon became general, for all who escaped from the swords of Godfrey and Tancred fell into the hands of the Provincials, equally thirsting for blood. The Saracens were massacred in the streets and in the houses. Jerusalem contained no place of refuge for the vanquished. Some sought to escape death by throwing themselves from the ramparts. Others flocked in crowds to the palaces, the towers, but particularly to the mosques, but nowhere could they escape the pursuit of the Christians. When the Crusaders made themselves masters of the Mosque of Omar in which the Saracens defended themselves for some time. A frightful repetition ensued of the scenes of carnage which attended the conquest of Titus. Horse and foot entered the mosque Palladio with the vanquished. In the midst of the most horrible tumult nothing was heard but groans, screams, and cries of death. The conquerors trampling over heaps of bodies in pursuit of all who endeavored to escape. Raymond Giles, an ocular witness, says that under the portico and in the porch of the mosque, the blood rose up to the knees and the bridles of the horses. 179. To paint the terrible spectacle which was presented at two periods in the same place, it will suffice to say, borrowing the words of the historian Josephus, that the number of the slain by far surpassed that of the soldiers who immolated them to their vengeance, and that the mountains near the Jordan in moans reach out the frightful sounds that issued from the temple. The imagination turns with disgust from these horrible pictures, and can scarcely, amidst the carnage, contemplate the touching image of the Christians of Jerusalem, whose chains the Crusaders had broken. They flocked from all parts to meet the conquerors. They shared with them all the provisions they had been able to steal from the Saracens, and with them offered up thanks to God for having granted such a triumph to the arms of the Christians. Peter the Hermit, who, 5 years before, had promised to arm the West for the deliverance of the Christians of Jerusalem, must have profoundly enjoyed the spectacle of their gratitude and exultation. Amidst all the Crusaders, they appeared only to see him. They recalled his words and his promises. It was to him they addressed their songs of praise. It was him they proclaimed their liberator. They related to him the evils they had suffered during his absence. They could scarcely believe what was passing before them. And, in their enthusiasm, they expressed astonishment that God should thus have employed only a single man to stir up so many nations and to effect such prodigies. The sight of the brethren they had delivered no doubt recalled to the minds of the pilgrims that they were come for the purpose of adoring the tomb of Christ. And the pious Godfrey, who had abstained from carnage after the victory, quitted his companions, and, followed by 3 attendants, repaired without arms and barefooted to the church of the Holy Sepulchre. 180. The news of this act of devotion was soon spread through the Christian army, and immediately all vengeance and all fury were at an end. The Crusaders, casting away their bloody vestments, made the city resound with their groans and their sobs, and, conducted by the clergy, marched together, with their feet bare and their heads uncovered, toward the Church of the Resurrection. When the Christian army was thus assembled on Calvary, night began to fall. Silence reigned over the public places and around the ramparts. 181. Nothing was heard in the holy city but hymns of penitence and these words of Isaiah, "You who love Jerusalem, rejoice with her." The Crusaders exhibited a devotion so animated and so tender that it might have been said, according to the remark of a modern historian, 182, that these men who had just taken a city by assault and had committed a horrible carnage had come forth from a long retirement and profound meditation upon our mysteries. These inexplicable contrasts are often to be observed in the history of the Crusades. Some writers have believed that they found in them a pretext to accuse the Christian religion itself, whilst others, not less blind or passionate, have endeavored to palliate the deplorable excesses of fanaticism. The impartial historian contents himself with relating them, and went in silence over the weaknesses of human nature. The pious fervor of the Christians always suspended the scenes of carnage. The policy of some of the leaders might make them believe that it was necessary to inspire the Saracens with as much dread as possible. They thought, perhaps also, that if they released the men who had defended Jerusalem, they should have to fight them over again, and that it was not prudent for them, in a distant country and surrounded by enemies, to undertake the charge of prisoners whose number by far surpassed that of their own soldiers. The approach of the Egyptian army likewise was announced, and the dread of a new danger closed their hearts against pity. In their council, a sentence of death was decreed against all the Muslims that remained in the city. 183. Fanaticism but too well seconded this barbarous policy. All the enemies, whom humanity or the fatigue of carnage had at first spared, and even such as had been saved in hopes of a rich ransom, were slaughtered. They compelled the Saracens to cast themselves from the tops of the towers and the houses. They made them perish in the midst of flames. They dragged them from their subterranean concealments to the public places, and there immolated them upon heaps of dead. Neither the tears of women nor the cries of infants, not even the sight of the very place where Christ had pardoned his executioners,
Hey,
could soften the
Barry.
hearts of the angry conquerors.
How you doing?
The carnage was so
I'm not getting
great
any
that,
warnings.
according to the report of Albert Dykes, bodies were soon heaped up, not only in the palaces, the temples, and the streets, but even in the most retired and solitary places. Such was the delirium of vengeance and fanaticism, that these scenes appear not to have been revolting to the eyes of those who beheld them. The contemporary historians describe them without thinking of excusing them, and amidst recitals of the most disgusting details, never allowed a single expression of horror or pity to escape them. 184. The few crusaders who had preserved any feelings of humanity had not the power to check the fury of an army who thought they were avenging outraged religion. 300 Saracens, who had taken refuge on the platform of the Mosque of Omar, were immolated on the day after the conquest, in spite of the prayers of Tancred, who had sent him his standard as a safeguard, and was indignant to find that so little respect was paid to the laws of honor and chivalry. 185. The Saracens, who had retreated to the fortress of David, were almost the only persons that escaped death. Raymond accepted their capitulation and had the good fortune and the glory to have it executed. But this act of humanity appeared so strange to the greater part of the Crusaders that they expressed less admiration for the generosity of the Count de Saint-Gilles and contempt for his avarice. 186. The carnage did not cease until the end of the week. Such of the Saracens as had been able to elude pursuit during this period were reserved for the service of the army. The Oriental and Latin historians agree in stating the number of the Muslims slain in Jerusalem to have been more than 70,000. The Jews met with no more mercy than the Saracens. The soldiers set fire to the synagogue in which they had taken refuge, and all perished in the flames. But it began to be feared that the bodies heaped up in the public places and the blood which had flooded the mosques and the streets might give rise to pestilential diseases, and the leaders gave orders.
Yeah, hold on a second. I got a lot of audio going on, buddy.
Which,
hold on.
Now, fury and fanaticism were satisfied. Must have been odious to.
I'm in one of those reading an awful book modes. Yeah. This guy, Michaud, wrote compendious 3-volume history of the Crusades. The Crusades are, it's like periods in Europe where the population got really high, and they said, well, you know, there's people that are not Catholic, you know, over in other parts of the world, you know, and they're just thumbing their nose at Jesus. So go kill them, you know, for population control. so they would go, you know, and basically they had these organizations of soldiers that would, like the Templars, for example. Your mission as a Templar was to kill anybody that's not Catholic. It's just, this is an old sect of the Christian religion, and yeah, it's the thing is the book that I'm reading here. The audio is well, it's written by kind of a French monarchist, so he kind of approves of it, you know. Of course, anybody that thumbs their nose at the Savior, Jesus Christ, you know, needs to go to hell. But so it's kind of, but it is you know, it's a noted history of the Crusades, so kind of.
You know, I got a realistic joke.
Okay, tell me a realistic joke.
I swear, Catholics or Christians, they can't wait to send somebody to hell. Like, they'll walk up to you, you're going to hell.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. There's there's a word that I think it was developed in the development of psychoanalysis, which is called catharsis. And catharsis is sort of like you go over something and you understand it in a way, or you tell a certain kind of story, and the story gives you some sense of relief. It's like the villain gets his just desserts or something like that. And you're like, I'm just glad that bad guy, the big bad wolf, finally got his comeuppance. But Christianity, I think it's a big problem with Christianity is bad catharsis, because many religions are like you should try to do good things and stop people from doing evil things. You should look around in the world and say, why are people doing these evil things, and try to change things. And that's what your religion is about. But what I mean by bad catharsis is where Christians say, oh, don't worry about the evil people, just let them go on ahead, because when they die they'll go to hell, right? And if you're good, even though they kill you, and you didn't do anything about it, and they bullied you and then they finally kill you, when you die you'll go to heaven, and then you'll be able to sit on the balcony in heaven and watch them being tortured in hell forever. Now, it's ridiculous. It's like but yeah, there it is. A lot of people think that way, and this was a complaint early on when Christianity was starting as a movement. Greeks would often complain. It's like, if you have this kind of religion that says, "Oh, everything will be settled after you die," then people don't defend themselves. People don't try to change things for the better. They're like, oh, the last judgment's going to happen. And then God is going to step up, and all the bad people that did bad things, then God is going to, fix things, Wouldn't it be better if, it was our duty to help God fix things?
Yeah.
Yeah. But, it's interesting. When I was a really little kid, there were two boys that lived up the street from me. And this is a time, let me see, how old was I? Really too young. Let me see, 7 or 8 or something. And they had magazines that had naked women in them. And this was called like a Playboy magazine or something like that. And Don and Paul Osborne, they would say that if you think about a naked girl or whatever, you're going to hell, right? And I was really scared, right? Because if somebody shows you a Playboy magazine and there's a naked girl, of course you think about her. Because it's right there in front of you, And you're like, really? I'm really going to hell? And they're like, yeah, And I was terrified, and I was like, this is like, and that's kind of like Southern sort of Protestant fare, what you would get down here. But finally, when I was thinking, eventually I was like, oh yeah, I don't really, well, when you learn about, a lot of religions do this, they say, well, everything is going to get settled after you die. Just shut up. Go about your business, because when you die, then the bad people are going to get in trouble. So don't worry about it. Which is a big ripoff, right? It's a scam, But I realized that all of a sudden one day I thought, well, why are Don and Paul? They have the naked girl magazine. They have the why are they not going to hell, or why are they not scared?
And you know what I don't get? How is that a sin if it's also the reproducive way of
exactly. And there's some it's actually it's important for procreation. It's and what you learn later on. And this is a good thing there's a very old writing in the Old Testament that there's a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to live, a time to die, a time for war, a time for peace, a time to plant, right? And what it means is that it's all about timing, right? So when you're say it's time for you to harvest the corn, but instead you're embracing, you're home in the bed or whatever, embracing with your wife, and the corn doesn't get harvested, well, then you starve, right? And the idea is that everything should be in your life should be ordered appropriately. And this is a thing. When Gandhi was in India, huge number of people were dying in the policy of the British Empire, the policies that were set up. Like the British would stop agricultural cultivation and force the people in India to cultivate opium that the British would then sell in China. And the people were starving and stuff. And when people study Gandhi, they'll go he's really very prudish, right? Because he would talk about, if you, the first thing he would talk about not going and having sex or whatever like that. He would say, well, the first thing you do is you don't go alone somewhere with your wife. Make a habit of not going, in a place where there's an opportunity for this to happen. And he's like, also, if you start to get a feeling like you want to embrace your wife or something like that, put cold water on your face. And a lot of people would say, this is so ridiculous because we do this to reproduce. Well, in fact, at the time in India, in the extreme poverty and starvation, and like human beings have a problem where the population growth really spikes in a crisis, like when there's a massive die-off or famine or starvation. There's also a rise in pregnancy and birth and everything. And so at one point I was reading Gandhi, and he said, right now, could you imagine if people were having sex just for enjoyment? The English are killing us, right? Actually during the total period of British Raj, an estimated 1.8 billion excess deaths happened in the Indian subcontinent, right? So, and in the West, there was a lot of hostility towards India because they were not Christian. Winston Churchill said, well, they have talking about them all dying off. He's like, well, they have a beastly religion, he said. So they should die, is what he, And so even to this day, anybody from India is 1.8 billion excess deaths in the period of the British Raj. But if you go on Facebook and try to write that, they're like, this is spreading false news, right? Fake news or whatever like that. Why are you so concerned about the Indian people's estimate of what you did to them and how bad it was, But I had that experience too, as when I was first a teenager. You look around and you think, well, everybody's doing it. All the guys have girlfriends and stuff like that. It's really not a good time for a successful, long-term, stable relationship until when you have a girlfriend or something like that. It's like the guy and the girl need to have something in common, some things in common, like each other, and then kind of be on the same kind of life course direction, and be able to support themselves and possibly a child if they have children. If you don't meet those standards, you get instability, you get divorce, you get fighting, we're all familiar with that, right? So it's like for me in my life, I had my first girlfriend, which I thought was serious, when I was in high school, maybe in ninth grade. And all it did was hurt me, you know. It really it hurt my study, it hurt my heart, and because the girl really was just having fun, you know. She was just doing that as a way to pass the time, and that's not what that's for, you know. And Gandhi, when I was reading Gandhi, he made the good point. He's like, "Can you look at how we're dying? We're being killed. Our whole world is collapsing around us. Are we going to go home and lay in bed with each other? You know, it'd be a disaster." So that sort of changed my, you know, the first time I read about how prudish Gandhi was, and all this stuff is like, don't ever go alone with your wife. You know, it's like, this guy is like kind of kooky or over the top or something. But then I realized in the historic period where he was that yeah, it was a matter of timing. There were vastly experienced vast surge in population growth and also starvation. It's not a good time to be making babies. So it's good to keep that under control. But the thing I was gonna say is, like, suddenly I realized Don and Paul, their mother and father had divorced, right? And their mother and father really were competing for the affection of their two sons. And the father was out of the house. The mother got the house. And there was a lot of animosity. And I understood that Don and Paul had been lied to. They didn't believe in hell already because they'd been told so many things by their parents and in their environment, the bad environment that they were in, that they were familiar that you kind of manipulate things, you control things by lying to people, right? So they come up to me, and of course they're looking at a naked woman, like they would go to hell, right? Because they're thinking about it. Why are they not scared? They're not scared because they don't believe it. They've been lied to too much already, and they've already thought it over and said, this is just phony. It's not real. It's not really going to happen. When you die, you're going to be dead. That's it. And really, the Bible does say that. If you go back to the Old Testament, when the Bible was actually being written, these are people that had been in slavery in Egypt, and in Egypt the afterlife was big business. Everybody made money off of it. You preparing your to go to the next world. You had all this embalming, you had to prepare a tomb, a massive expenditure. So it's a huge business. And in the early time of the Bible, these people had escaped from Egyptian religion and rejected it. So when you read in Ecclesiastes, it's attributed to Solomon. It maybe not have been written by King Solomon, but he says, "Behold your dust, and to dust is to the dust that you're returning." Like we come from dust. And then when we die, we go back to dust. And then we don't come back again until God calls us forth again out of the dust. And all this stuff about the next world and the afterlife, where everything is going to get settled in the day of judgment, that's something that emerges later by the mixing of the different religions. Go ahead.
So, do you do you believe in souls? How people have souls, and once they die, their soul is released from their body?
Well, think about it. If that's the case, what if it's the nature of what the soul is. I hesitate to say, okay. Think about this, the classic thing where the how should I put it? the Jewish people, they go to Mount Sinai, and Moses goes to get the law from God, and they immediately build. He doesn't come back, and they build a golden calf, right? And it's a very bad thing that they've done, but they recorded it in their history, and they always remember it, right? We didn't follow the true God. We followed a fake God. So if somebody says, "Do you believe in the soul?" Well, maybe I don't believe in your soul, sir, right? Whoever said it to me, because I don't know what your conception of a soul is. Now, in India, for example, Buddhism is a big break. It's considered a heresy of Hinduism, and Buddhism was actually forced out of India in antiquity. It became a very decadent religion, and then spread into Asia. But they said that the soul was not permanent. And the word that they use for soul in India is Atman, which is, they have a complicated notion of it. But to this day, many Hindus believe that it is a permanent, unchanging thing. But think about this. If that's the case, when somebody gets Alzheimer's and they're like, and then they have a heart attack, okay, so their soul comes out, and what is it? To a certain extent, I would say I don't believe in the notion of a soul that's based on my consciousness of the world. Because my consciousness of the world is often illusion, right? It's, if I was jealous of a college girlfriend because I thought she was interested in somebody and she wasn't, it's fake. It's not real. If I had some hurtful, painful idea, or any idea that was most of what we experience in life, all we can experience because of our limited perception is an aspect of that thing. And so in a sense, everything is illusory. So when people say, well, it's me, like my soul, like the Cartesian notion, well, I close my eyes, I think, therefore I am. Maybe that thinking thing is part of the physical phenomena of existence, and that is what is something that's important, and if not important, but permanent or impermanent. God, sorry.
Hey.
Go ahead.
So, if we really do have like a burning energy inside us, what if like instead of going to the afterlife, it clings onto a piece of metal?
Oh yeah.
Like a knife or something, like. Because I believe possession can go past, if it is real, if possession can go past, like, living beings.
Yeah. You'll find, this is an interesting thing that you brought up. This comes up in China, in the indigenous religion of China, which is a very ancient conglomeration of more primitive religions. But like the Egyptian religion, all the people believe that when you die, you go to another world, right? And in that world, there's a government, judges, an administration. It's like, but in the Chinese indigenous religion, this idea of something that remains, like a ghost, right, that could possess something, or its presence is around things that the individual person owned, or something like an object or something like that. This is a belief, and even today in modern China, what they call the part, like, okay, there's two parts to your ghost when you die. There's the spirit part, which is the ling, and when you die, an administrator of the government of the next world arrests you. You get arrested and you get taken before a court. And they, like, for example, they bring you before the court and they're like, hey, you're not supposed to be here. You committed suicide, you know. And then they're like, okay, send him to the administration for people that commit suicide. And a judge reviews your case and gives you charges, and that determines your punishment or how long you remain in the netherworld before you go back to the world or something like that. But the other part is called the po, and it will remain around the grave. So that's one way of thinking. Also around the house and places where. So when I was working in China, and I got invited on New Year to a family dinner, and the grandparents had died, the practice was to set everything there that the grandparents, their whole meal, in other words, we were having dinner and there was another table with the plates and rice and wine and everything there for the parents the grandparents who were deceased, and this will carry on until for a number of years, until a certain amount of time has passed, and then they feel like, also they go to the grave and they clean it, they sweep it and take care of it, and during the period where the paw has not, that's the ghost part, maybe the part that's not at rest. Now in Judaism, like a spirit that's not at rest is called a dibuk, dybbuk, and I don't know when this started, but like if there was some judgment, like terrible judgment that was passed on someone, then their spirit would be bound on earth, right? And they have to be released as like sort of like forgiven in heaven. Like God has to look at it and go, okay, this guy is cool. After something has happened or whatever, we're gonna say, this guy is cool. But also the people that were around that person that had that judgment of the person also have to go, this is cool. So, and this is, you find this, there's something in the New Testament about what Jesus said, something that's bound on earth is bound in heaven, and released on earth is released in heaven. That's the idea. But of course, it doesn't. If you read a lot of history and the history of the Bible, like if you get an Encyclopedia Judaica and you read all that stuff, what you find is like when the Jewish people got out of Egypt, they generally were rejecting the idea of an afterlife or permanence of the soul. This was something very Egyptian, and they had been slaves in Egypt, and they really hated that stuff, and they were like, this is all phony, and we don't believe in it. So you still find today some Jewish people are very much like that. A lot of times they will say, well, I'm an atheist or whatever, but really it's sort of the same thing. When it's like, I don't believe in the golden calf that you've constructed, so I'm an atheist. It's like somebody comes to me and says, do you believe in my God? No, I don't. I don't even know what that is. Right? So have you had ghostly experiences?
Had like hallucinations.
Do tell, like, of what happens. I mean, look. First of all, I'll tell you, I have a number of personal close relationships with. Well, I have had actually. Bill, I think, has passed away. I had a close friend for many years who saw things that were not there. So it's all about how you take it. Sometimes what's really important is that you don't get chronically upset by it. But go on. Tell me about what you see.
So, when I was about 5 or 6, I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
I live in Amarillo now, in Texas, but I used to live in Groom. So, I w- there's I lived in like an add-on to our house. My room was in that add-on,
Mm-hmm.
and my not Nana, my Momo, my grandmother, whatever, passed away recently. So I walked out of my room in the morning, and so I turned to the door to go into the main house, and because there's a room right next to that, and out of the corner of my eye, I see her in her wheelchair just sitting there, and I turn around and then nothing there.
Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm.
Like there wasn't even anything there to begin with that I could have thought I saw her
Right.
in her wheelchair.
Right. That I think is really normal. It's not something that you should be concerned about. We know from cognitive neuroscience today that uh, a lot of times our brain fills in certain information that things that we see repeatedly. Your brain says, okay, I am this thing that the information is coming into my eye, and I don't have to fully process it because it's a common thing that I've seen a lot. And so when you see, and I've had that experience too, where it's this thing out of the corner of my eye. I see someone or something that was commonplace, and for some reason is no longer there anymore, and then all of a sudden, I'm like, whoa, is that, But when I look, there's nothing there, right? So I think that kind of thing is. Now I'll tell you, my friend, the Bill, he was playing soccer one day, and just he started seeing stuff that was not there, and the healthcare system at the time, they were like really was like during Ronald Reagan, and he was cutting all the money for mental health care and stuff. So my friend ended up living on the street. I took him in, but he really saw stuff that was not there, and I think that he did much better because he remained calm about it. And but he this is the thing that happened with him, and you'll think this is really bizarre. He said that there was an alien spacecraft, right, that was going through the solar system, and they had an engine failure, and they crashed on Earth, and they hid the ship, right, and they had to send out a beacon with information about their spaceship, and they had to store the information in his brain, right? So they used this alien technology to zap his brain and put the spaceship data into his brain to preserve it, and they were like beaconing, but it was going to take a long time for the signal to go out of the solar system for them to get help. And what happened is the U.S. government had intercepted these communications, and what happened to Bill is like these government people would come when he was asleep at night, and they would extract the spaceship engine drive data, parts of it from his brain with some kind of instruments. And each day, when the government had successfully operated during the night, they would send a secret transmission directly to his television set. So he would say when he was watching television, they would send him a message, and all of a sudden the TV would be something that was directed directly at him that would say, we successfully removed this data, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of people, including his family, were very scared because they're like, he's crazy. And yeah, but what those kind of, a bad thing for people like that is for everybody to say, you're crazy, or lock him up, because it really stresses you out. You need to be comforted and reassured. There's a movie which is kind of a bad rendition of the true story of this mathematician's life, but there's a famous mathematician, and they made a movie about him called A Beautiful Life, and it's something like that happened to him. He had government officials would come to him and talk to him and give him missions that he had to go on and complete, and it was all stuff that he saw that wasn't there. And eventually, he's actually a great mathematician. He made all these discoveries and everything like that. And his wife cared for him very much. And eventually, he noted, people told him, man, this stuff that you're seeing is not real. Right? And he didn't believe them. Right? But then there was like one person that always appeared to him that was a child. And finally, he noticed that the child never got older. It's like a decade goes by, and the child that visited him and talked to him never got older. And then he realized, oh, it is really true. I do see things that nobody else sees but me. Right? And actually, he recovered, and he still saw stuff and still heard voices talking to him. But because he was chill about it, he was able to live and have a decent, successful life. He was unfortunately killed in a stupid taxi car accident. But, let me see. That movie, I think, was called, I'll look it up. It's called A Beautiful Mind. But I recommend, like right now, if you want to study your brain, it's a great time to do it, because all our new computing technology and everything, instruments, magnetic resonance imaging and all that stuff, it allows us to look at what's happening in people's brains in real time, and there's a lot of discoveries. It's like a big new frontier. It's called cognitive neuroscience.
I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I also had a couple weeks ago, I had a dream that this black shadow figure opened my door and stood in front of my bed, and then I wake up in the morning and my door's open. And I usually sleep with it closed, and I did not forget to close it. I remember shutting it, and my door was open after I have that dream.
Mm-hmm.
And it freaked me out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Things that can, there can be explanations for things like that. Okay. Here's the thing. This is sort of like it has a pattern of like a predator, the danger of a predator when you're asleep, right? And anthropologists have argued, and I had a course with the teaching company. They're like, we get this. It's a very common phenomena that you'll have a dream experience where there's something comes, a monster or something, or, an evil presence or something like that, that threatens you when you're asleep, and you can't move or whatever, or it's coming out from the closet or the bed or coming in the door or something like that. And what anthropologists have said is like, well, when we trace our ancestry, our earliest relatives, hominids or whatever, if we follow the data that's called the mitochondrial Eve. The mitochondria is it's a genetic thing that's only passed from the mother, So our earliest human, we call human relatives. Okay, you can't have sex with a goat and then have goat people babies, right? So yeah, it doesn't work, right? It's like a gorilla. You can't marry a chimpanzee because you're not going to have. It doesn't work, right? So when we talk about in biology our nearest relatives, we're talking about organisms that we could possibly reproduce with. So the earliest ones of these are thought to be, I haven't checked the latest data, but about a 250,000 years ago in what used to be German East Africa, now called Tanzania. But the anthropologist said all these kind of people, they lived when they were threatened by predators whenever they slept, right? So they would climb up into trees and sleep up into trees. So there's often a fear of something coming from under the bed or something like that. And the thing about fear, and this was a famous statement when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, the president said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself," right? Fear is a destroyer, right? So it means fear is, and it we know now, fear is physically harmful for the brain, right? So if you can develop an understanding of what the fear is coming from, right? You can ease your mind about it. But having said that, there are predators. There are people that break into houses at night and stuff like that. That is true. What can you do? Get a dog. A black shadowy figure is not going to walk into your room if you got a Labrador sit there by the side of your bed, right? Simple solution. For me, I panicked. We had a incursion of rodents into the house because there's a big forest behind my house, and my wife she would always, when we were going somewhere in a car, she would always forget something and rush back to the back of the house to get it. And then when she would leave the house again, she would leave the door standing open. So we go to the park, for 3 or 4 hours, and the back door of the house is just like wide open. Any kind of rabbit or possum or rat or anything could come in the house. And it was happening. And I was freaking out. I was like, I'm never, because my wife didn't want to have any pets. She didn't like pets, But when that happened, I said, this is it, dear. I'm sorry, we're getting a cat. And I got this, we went to the shelter and I got the craziest Mauser cat. And I mean, that cat is like all over the place. There's not even a bug is not safe. right. So, I mean, I'm just offering that as a solution. If that happens as a recurring thing. First of all, it's very common. It happens to a lot of people. Especially young people at night. I'll give you, this is something, I married an Asian woman, right? My wife is, Asian people, when a man and a woman, they have a baby, the baby is in the bed with them, between them, right? So when I was born, first I was in a crib, and then immediately I was put in my own room, and it didn't matter if I cried and I was scared or something like that. No, my mom was like, "You're out of here, buddy." She would never keep me as a baby in the bed with her. When I was in her room, I was in a crib. And then by the time, I was, 1 and 8 months, I was in my own room. And if that's just our culture, right? Asian people don't do that. Chinese people, personal Chinese friends are like, yeah, we have the baby in between mom and dad, And so it's very rare, I think, that my daughter experiences nightmares, right? She does have them from time to time, but if she wakes up, now, right now we're kind of at the stage where my daughter is getting ready to have her own room. She's like turning 6 or something like that, and she's starting to get, this is my room, kind of. She's starting to get that attitude. But I already don't sleep with them. When my wife get together, it's usually and I get together, it's when the baby's asleep, and I have my own bedroom, which I'm actually, there's a loft up here behind me, and that's where I sleep, up there. It's been a good experience for me, because I realized part of the reason why very young people have these terrifying experiences is because their parents separate them like that and put them off in a dark place by themselves, and it's natural for that to trigger what we call primal, like maybe an instinctive fear. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a dog, but I was thinking of this, like, so there's a game. I don't know if you've heard of it. You've probably heard of it. It's like a big game series. It's called Five Nights at Freddy's.
Oh yeah, man! All the kids play that.
Yeah. And what they just play the 5 nights. They don't know the terrifying story behind it. So there's a guy, William Afton, also known as Purple Guy. So his child is taken by his own brother and put in the mouth of one of the animatronics. Well, his tears activate the spring locks, which causes all of that robotic metal and heavy wiring in the head to come down on his head, collapsing his head and causing the bite of 83. So, and then what William Afton does is, even though it was his own child's fault, the animatronic was created by his business partner Henry Emily, he decides to go kill his child. And then he just gets a burning feeling inside, kills 4 more. So what they don't know is the animatronics. So the story is he stuffed the bodies into the animatronics, and this is where I got that question from earlier. And the souls cling onto the metal, forming a remnant, and they're just sitting in those animatronics, just suffering. But then William decides to dismember the animatronics to get rid of all the evidence. But that releases the children's souls, and they come after him while he's in the pizzeria. And William has this, I don't know what it's called, but he he feels more powerful when he's inside of a spring-locked suit, a spring body. But but since it's spring-locked, there's spring locks inside of it, and moisture, and because the tears are there, moisture or even heavy breathing on them can set them off, lunging bits of metal into your body. Because the way it works is there's a hand crank. You crank it up and it removes the robotic like machinery to the side of the suit so a human can wear it. But on the endoskeleton they needed something to make it hold on. So there's spring locks that'll shoot forward, and around the neck there's a bunch of two little fish hooks, and they'll come down and into his neck. But he gets spring locked, and that reforms Remnant. So he's left 30 years in a room in a rotting pizzeria to also rot. And all this is happening, and there's all this suffering. But there's Cassidy. Cassidy's one of the angriest souls. So Cassidy is in the Golden Freddy suit. So, but Cassidy is just so angry. Her soul has so much anger and madness inside that all the other souls that he killed, they want to kill him, so their souls will be released to the afterlife. But what Cassidy says is death is too good for him. I want to see him suffer like he made all of us.
So does that scare you?
So what?
It's scary. That's a scary story. But yeah, in terms of believing in souls, like in that kind of sense, it's a very old phenomena, like where because somebody was murdered, right, that they can't their spirit is not at rest, and they manifest strange phenomena, like when you're in this house or whatever, in old movies they would have like a suit of armor, like a giant suit of armor, and the suit of armor would be holding this big battle axe, right? Big giant, pole arm hatchet thing. And when you walk by, the axe would like drop and like it's gonna chop you or something like that. And I think it's fascinating. There's a very old story about a possession. So there's a town, maybe in Poland or something like that, and there's a guy, and he's like possessed, right? He screams and he cries, and his family doesn't know what to do to him, so they take him to this very holy rabbi, right? And the rabbi calls out to him and says, "What is your name?" And the guy's like, "I won't tell you my name." And he says, "Well, show me your face." And the voice is like crying out of the man's mouth, and he's like, I you know I if I showed you my face, you would be, terrified. You wouldn't be able to withstand it. And he says, nevertheless, yeah, I have to, I must see your face. And he says, the voice says, then go with me to this field. And the rabbi, he calls 10 people to go as witnesses, and they go to the field, and he says, show me your face. And all of a sudden, this giant head, it's like a little tiny humanoid body, right? And then it's got this huge, massive, horrific, large head appears, right? And he's like, what is your name? And he says, I won't tell you my name. I'm the Israelite centurion that struck the prophet Zechariah, and the mob fell on him and killed him. And the rat, everybody's like, they were like really, freaked out, right? So they say, you've got to go to the tzaddik of Lublin, right? So he's like considered like a very, there are a lot of stories around this particular guy, of his power and his insight and everything. And so he goes to him, and he's like, tell me your name and show me your face. And everybody is like freaking out. And the rabbi says that nobody in all the years since the time of the prophet Zechariah, no one has shown mercy to this Dibuk. Hear his voice and listen to what he has to say. And in fact, the ancient Jewish people, they believed that when a prophet spoke, this is a very, a lot of people would call it superstitious. They say that once the prophet makes their prophecy, they predict what is going to happen, like Elijah talking about the famine that was going to happen if they rebuild Jericho because of the curse of Joshua or whatever. Like once the prophet speaks, there's no changing. Even God can't change it, right? Right, it has to be fulfilled, right? So this Israelite centurion, he tried to get Zechariah to shut up because they knew that the temple was going to be destroyed, and they wanted time. They wanted time to try and atone for the sinful things that the people had done, so the temple would not be destroyed. So he struck the prophet because he was trying to save the temple, right? And when the people all heard it, right, they were like, "That's amazing," And everybody, of course, saw his position and that he was forgivable, right? And because the rabbi of Lublin did that, the Spirit said, behold, I've been bound on earth for centuries. I've come back, he's been possessing people, 200 possessions, right? And in all that time, no one showed me any mercy, and only this rabbi, right, showed mercy on me, and now my spirit can go to rest. I was forgiven in heaven, but I was not forgiven on earth, right? So that's an old belief that they had, that if there was some terrible thing that you did, and this guy was trying to a prophet was trying to prophesy, and he struck him, and then when he did that, the mob fell on the prophet and killed him, which often happened historically. Prophets were dissidents. People didn't like what they said, and they're often faced death. So when this rabbi solicited mercy on the in the thoughts of men on behalf of this spirit, the spirit was able to go out of the man and go to its eternal rest. So this story, I think, is maybe, it could be as old as 3 or 4 centuries old, maybe even older. But the reason I told it to you is because, like you said, the angry souls or whatever that were in the robot or something like that. This is it's a pattern that you can find that goes back through human history and folklore, especially ghost stories and stuff. And the thing to bear in mind is that consciousness, these notions or ideas take form, in various ways in our own consciousness. And that's really, if they exist at all, that's really where they really indubitably would they definitely exist. So you can say such things are true in the sense that they're perceived. If somebody really has a tangible perception of something, it exists in that sense. But by the same argument, you could say for everybody that's not experiencing that, it doesn't exist. So it really exists in the mind of the individual, individually, that one person or whatever.
And
I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, I know it's not real, but
Yeah.
Still, the story just is off-putting. So, and one of the thing is, in every game in UCM Ultimate Custom Night, if they jump scare you and kill you, they say a voice line. Well, every single animatronic has a rare chance to say something along the lines of, "I've seen him, the one you shouldn't have killed." And that's referring to Cassidy, the angriest soul.
Right. I watched Kaidi. I don't know how you pronounce her name. I've never heard her say her own name out loud on her stream, but I think it's Kydae. Kaidi. But she's a big Valorant player. Sometimes she has 5,000 people watching her on Valorant. She's just a little girl, and I saw her playing a game, and it was like it's like a ghost insane asylum or something like that. It was like an abandoned insane asylum, but there were like zombie killers going around in the dark, and it was and she got jump scared a number of times just in the game, right? So when you see these kind of this is a phenomena too, where with YouTube as a new communication medium, people are looking, like, young people in particular, they go around and they look at stuff that has 5 million views or something like that, right? And they're like, let me make something like that, right? So you've got a situation, everybody like wants to be have their video go viral or something like that. So they're looking at these creepy stories that have 1 million views, and they're trying to make a copy or something of that. And I know it can be kind of addicting. So as like with my own daughter, and really my wife is addicted to. My wife, she watches creepy horror little short videos or whatever. Like, just she's addicted. She's addicted to it. She can't stop. But when you have something like that, then it can become a problem because it's just taking up all your time. It's like if my wife watched 250 creepy pasta videos or something, It's like one of the things that my wife focuses on is human trafficking of children, right? But she has not done a single thing in her life to work against it, right? So if you're concerned about children being abducted and stuff, raise awareness. This is a thing in the United States today. Conditions of slavery exist, and the number of people in the United States that essentially they're taken somewhere against their will, and they're only remunerated, they only get paid in food and shelter, right? They can't escape. They have to do some kind of service or whatever work. That is slavery, right? And the numbers really outnumber the number of people living in slavery during the period of the transatlantic slave trade. And I like work in I used to work in a 90%, a 95% black schools, and my kids were not aware that slavery exists in the United States. Now, the Global Slavery Index is a online website, Global Slavery Index, and you can learn about how people get put into conditions of slave labor, the numbers, and you can read about it, and you can petition about it, and you can raise public awareness. And one of the things, like in one bad neighborhood, when they did a campaign, what they would do is like they would go in the kids' restrooms, and they would put a little poster in the toilet, right, that says, if you are here against your will or whatever, if you're being held or something, or if you're being trafficked or something like that, here's a phone number, call. And it's like in my community, they were doing something about it, right? So, and this is a discussion I've had with my wife. It's like, you're watching all these horrible stories about this stuff, and you feel bad and stuff, and yet you refuse to get involved with organizations that are actually working on this and trying to put a stop to it and do something about it. It's like Donald Trump had a kiddie modeling agency where they were they were trafficking little girls. It's the Trump modeling something or whatever like that. And there's all these horror stories about what happened, but it was activists who really called attention to what he was doing and what he was involved in that finally brought us, he couldn't really run for the presidency with that stuff going on. He had to finally shut it down. And, it was activists that put a stop to his activities by doing something about it. Right. So that's my, kind of my important point is that you get into this thing of like looking at something horrific, the killings and stuff like that. Well, yeah, it's horrible what happens, but what? So what? Well, let's do something. Let's find out. Is there an organization that helps people that are being threatened? It's like women that are battered women. A guy that dated my oldest sister helped to rebuild in our neighborhood a building caught on fire, and he got a loan and did a big restoration project on the building. I mean, years later, it's a very profitable building now. He owns a building, and but he really went out on a limb to restore this building. And when he first started it, they set up a battered women's shelter in it because there's the real problems of women that were trying to get out of abusive relationships, and they needed a place to hide, a shelter, right? and he worked on setting that up. And that's an example of like, you see something terrible and you're like, I'm not going to stand for this. I'm going to do something about it. That I think is a better approach. But my daughter watches the creepy, some of the creepy. I guess the latest thing, which I haven't seen, what she was watching, is called Dr. Bob. You seen that?
No, I haven't. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I have to look it up. But she, of course, she watches Rainbow Friends. You know Rainbow Friends, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the colors of the rainbow turn into monsters that eat children or whatever, right? Blue, red, green.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like people trying to get views. I'll tell you, this is a thing that happened. I was in mathematics in school, and I had a bad relationship with my eldest brother, and my eldest brother was in filmmaking. And then when I went to graduate school, I said, maybe if I go into film and communication, I could learn how to do the stuff that my brother does, and we could have a better relationship. So that's what it's part of the story of how I ended up going into film and video production for so many years, which is what I did for many years. But when I was at college at Georgia State University, literally the college professor is like, you get into the movie industry by making sex or horror movies, or both, right? So we're like studying all these movies, and in my life I never had to watch so many schlock horror films, and sorority night, bloodbath, whatever. I don't know. It's just like the whole phenomena of like all these people who are like, I want to make it big in the movie industry. So, and what are they're talking about? They're talking about, well, everybody wants to see horror and sex. They want to see naked girls and violence and stuff. Not necessarily, right? And that's one of the things that I liked about being in China and where I was teaching animation in China. Shows that you made were supposed to have some kind of good purpose, right? To teach you something, a lesson about life or something like that. About injustice or poverty or doing things that you shouldn't do. One of our animations that we made, it was made for Vietnamese television, and it was about a little cat, and the cat there would always be some regulation, like a sign or something, do this or don't do that, and he would be like, oh, but if I do this, I could scam or get over or something. And then the stories would always go like that. He would start trying to beat the system and get ahead by scamming or something like that, and then it would create this avalanche of disasters, until it ended up with him more of a loser than he was when he started, right? And I thought there was a lot of value in that. But in the United States, they were making what was called Happy Tree Friends. And in the Chinese, when we were having in Chongqing, we were having animation class, and Party Central, the Chinese Communist Party has officials that are on the university campus, and they came into the class and they were like, the Happy Tree Friends is banned, right? And nobody should watch Happy Tree Friends, and they should also not share, like promulgate promote Happy Tree Friends, and you can go to jail, right, for doing that. And but this is the reality of China. That very night, every single 100%, it was like, this is our solemn duty. Everybody that the government told us we can't watch Happy Tree Friends. Every single person has to watch every single Happy Tree Friends episode. And they also changed all their icons on all their chats and everything like that. 100%, it's like 90 kids in the group that I could see. They all watched every single, they were told it's illegal, it's banned, it's bad, it's perverted. It is bad and perverted, nasty. But the result, it's like, they told us that we can't do this, so everybody has to do it. It's like, if you don't do it, then you're going to be like what is it? They have a word, they say a nickel, a 5-cent party member, like somebody, you're scraping to get a little bit of payment or remuneration from the government by spouting their party line, which is Happy Tree Friends is bad for you. And my personal position as an outside observer is that Happy Tree Friends was bad for them. But that's just the reality that you have to face. There's a word like tendency. People have a tendency to do something, right? And the bad version of that is a word called proclivity, right? So proclivity is where you have a tendency to watch twisted stuff or violent stuff or sexual stuff to a point where it's really taking up your time. It's like arresting your personal development because you can't learn anything about the world because you're doing something over and over again that's a waste of time. So I personally, I feel that focusing on all that, there's I don't know. Sexual stuff is creative, right? This is an old psychoanalytic. Like we have a drive to reproduce, right? And that's the creative drive, and then we have a destructive drive, right? That makes us do destructive things, right? Wars and stuff like that, and violence. And that we have both these phenomena going on, and really, for long-term survival, human beings have to control those things, keep them, don't let them, don't deliberately unleash all the bad stuff. Like the Germans took that idea, the Nazis, and they were like, well, we should take the love part and direct it towards our leaders and towards the German people, racially towards Germans, encourage young people to reproduce as much as possible and stuff. And all that love energy is supposed to be turned inward toward our group. And then all the destructive energy that we have is to be turned outward against other people. And it was a disaster. It was a big, terrible, destructive, horrible war. And not a good way to go by any stretch of the imagination. So, got to keep that stuff under control. You're go ahead.
I don't know. I really didn't know what I was gonna say. I just said something down.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know kids watch a lot of that stuff, and I had my for 2 years, my daughter was she was at home in the house, and my wife had health problems, so my daughter was watching YouTube. She learned when she was like 2, to control the remote and stuff like that. I got her on computers and I got her a cell phone as soon as possible, right? Because it's very engaging and it stimulates. But I really believe that parents need to supervise supervise it so they can talk to their children about what they're experiencing, and don't just leave them alone. But our society, the way our society is ordered, is like you essentially give your children to government institutions, and mom and dad both work, and there's no full-time family like you get in a lot of cultures. In modern Chinese culture, for example, there's generally some full-time family. There's aunts and uncles and grandparents that are very much involved in the upbringing of and this has bad stuff about it too much attention, but I really don't think that the system that we have in the United States, if you look at it, we've got all these teachers, right? And in my experience, I never met teachers that were like, very few that it was their dream to be a teacher. They were like, when I was going to school, there were all these people around me in my classes and stuff, and they were like, we're going to be making six figures at Microsoft, and we're going to get the highest level computer science, high paying jobs and stuff like that. And then they couldn't pass linear algebra. They couldn't pass advanced calculus, right? And they're like, well, I've got all this math. What can I do? I'll be a math teacher. Right? So then they go out and they borrow money to get a car that they can't afford. And they borrow money to get a 30-year mortgage for a house that they can't afford. And then they go into the schools to take care of somebody else's kids. And they can't stay with their kids to take care of their kids. And they're there because they've got bills to pay. It's a bad situation. I hope that you have good teachers. I hope all kids have good teachers, but I've seen a lot of very bad teachers, and I don't even want to be involved in the teaching system anymore, unless I start my own school or a school is started that I approve of it more. And I'm much happier now. I'm staying at home with my daughter full time, and I get to talk to her and coax her away from spending too much time wasting time looking at garbage. If I tear her away from it, or I try to force her, right, that just leads to estrangement, which means that she's trying to hide from me so she can do this thing that she's really addicted to or she wants to do. What I have to do as a parent is I have to find something more interesting to get her away from it. So that's what I do. I have a lot of really cool toys and science experiments and all this stuff. One thing bad about the science experiments is like now she goes into the bathroom and tries to mix stuff to get together to see if something happens. That's dangerous, dear. So one thing I do with her that she really loves is we get a big giant clear container, plastic container of water, and drip food coloring into it, and the food coloring makes all these patterns in the water because of the convection currents. In water, there's thermodynamics. Some of the water is warmer and some of it's colder. So, and temperature is, say you get water out of the refrigerator. It's cold, right? And you bring it into room temperature. Well, this is going to create little currents in the water that are very complicated. It's like convection, as the thermodynamics of the water getting to a temperature equilibrium take place. So if you drip food coloring into the water, it makes these incredibly beautiful patterns. And that's one thing that I do with my daughter to get her. Otherwise, she's like trying to find every vinegar and baking soda in the house to make a volcano, by mixing vinegar and baking soda. But I have to do stuff like that to get her away sometimes from stupid YouTube videos. Have you seen Wreck-It Ralph?
Yes. Okay.
Did you like that movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good too. Incidentally, they use software called Houdini in that movie. That if you're ever interested in that kind of stuff, Houdini, no other software can do this stuff that you see in Wreck-It Ralph, which is like done with Houdini. That's they cornered the market for that capability. Other 3D software can't get close to that. But Wreck-It Ralph has to make a YouTube channel to get the steering wheel for his friend's game or whatever like that. And he has to make like a viral video or whatever, and it really is dealing with that thing of just making stupid stuff that people laugh at, foolish things like that, comedy stuff. And if my daughter is getting into watching that stuff to the exclusion of everything else, it kind of gets to be a waste of time. So sometimes I'll intervene on that, but I generally try to persuade her away with some kind of activity like Legos or something constructive.
Yeah, and I play it. There's a VR game that I like to play. It's called Gorilla Tag. I love it. Just the community is way too toxic sometimes.
Yeah, man. That's bad. Way too. Yeah. You gotta just, I don't know, tune those guys out. I reported somebody on Macarena. Some guy yesterday. I was trying to get in bed. That's one of the reasons why I'm like, well, I don't know. I may seem hyper. I am hyper, but I'm not, really fully myself this morning because I went to bed too late because I was trying to report somebody on Macarena who was they had some kind of, Macarena usually bleeps out all the bad stuff if you use bad words or whatever like this. But this guy had some kind of mod or hack or something like that where he could just say every single filthy, disgusting word and insulting and racist, hateful stuff. And I was getting ready to go to bed, and I was like, my daughter gets on this. I don't want my daughter to see this kind of garbage, So I was looking around for how to report somebody, and I didn't go to sleep when I should have, which is one of the reasons why I'm tired today. But it's got to be the middle of the night for you, isn't it? It's like 6:30 here.
Yeah, it's like 5:24 down here in Texas.
Yeah. So yeah, it's 6:24 here. That's what I thought. But you're all right? You're not having a bad time, are you?
No, I'm good.
Good. Yeah, I sent that movie A Beautiful Mind, and it's a true story. Well, it's based on a true story, but it's all Hollywood, changed it around and stuff like that. But it's
Yeah.
it's an interesting story of a person that saw a lot of scary stuff that wasn't there, and eventually he realized, oh, it really isn't there. And then he was chill with it, and he lived out his life until he was killed. He was a very successful mathematician and worked and got along fine, even though he saw he hallucinated stuff. So generally, there's some very, like what you said, seeing somebody out of the corner of your eye or whatever. That's something that's just kind of a phenomena that we've discovered is commonplace in cognitive neuroscience. But your brain has the capability to do that, but it doesn't, because it knows it's not supposed to do that. It's got to get a strong enough signal to make a sustained image of some kind appear. Otherwise your brain will shut it down and get rid of it. And that's why you get this thing of like something is moving there in the corner of your eye and you think it's something, and then you turn suddenly and it's completely gone. And you're like, whoa. The thing is like, don't be scared. Just realize that it's a phenomenon, and it's actually a fact. And I personally, I was going to tell you, I was introduced to another guy that had schizophrenia and saw things that weren't there. But his family members, they tell everybody he sees stuff that's not there, and he was upset, right? It's like, people are lying to me. That's very tangible. I see these things. And he was having a bad time and tend to be very angry and stuff like that. Whereas on the other hand, my friend Bill, yeah, I mean, he saw a lot of weird stuff that wasn't there, but he was just like chill, He's like, well, I'm okay. And that, just in the same way, it's like fear is the mind killer, so you just need to talk to people about it and be calm about it. Talk to people that you trust. And yeah, don't let it bother you. Don't let it bother you. If skies are gray, learn to grin, take it on the chin, everything will be okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. You gonna say something?
No.
I guess I better go play a couple of rounds of Macarena.
Okay.
We should get together and play some Macarena. Life is great when you're playing Macarena.
I currently do not have my computer. It's at my mom's house. I'm at my dad's house right now, though.
Oh, okay. Well, no hurry. Is school going okay?
Yeah, still playing the tuba.
Good. Yeah. I have not been playing enough guitar. Let me see. Turn to everything. Let me see. I can't play this on my. Okay, Bernie, it's good to talk to you. Hopefully that was helpful. And I'm going to send a song your way. And have a good night. Get some rest.
You too.
All right, take care. Call me anytime.
I will try.
All right, have a good one.
Okay.
Oh, it's lagging. Oh, okay. Okay. This is something I gotta fix. My frame rate is down. So actually, what I'm gonna do. Thanks for tuning in. I'm gonna stop the stream and restart. With my frame rate back up where it should be. This is something I was trying to run Valorant, stream Valorant. I made a lot of changes. Got to fix that right now. I can see it. All right.